Humanities. Thank you all for coming tonight to hear our romance and science fiction finalists in the Colorado Book Awards for 2020. Everything we do at Colorado Humanities is a team effort, and I would like to let you all know that we would not be here if Chris Goff hadn't said, sure, we can figure out online Colorado Book Awards, you bet, and we'll stay on schedule too. So thanks to Chris, thanks to Tanya Albright, who doesn't have video, and there are no cameras to be found in the metro area, and she's got the logo up for us. She's our tech support. There's an army of volunteers behind all of us. We have board of directors who are working really hard with us to help us stay relevant, and especially today. And the army of volunteers who select the finalist books are incredible. They are so invested in this decision. And I just want to let all the finalists know here, this is the list. If you clear their judgment, you're there. So congratulations. Now I want to let you all know how this will go. We'll ask finalists and speakers to mute their microphones unless they are the one talking or the one asking the question. And that will help us all hear better. And for attendees, your microphones are currently muted. And we invite you to introduce yourself and let us know you're here by typing your name and any contact information you'd like to share in chat, just as if we were all mingling in the book bar before the program started. And if you have a question for the author, please type it in the chat feature and we'll help the authors find them. Although we're online this year, instead of snug in the book bar with a treat and a beverage, we can still purchase books through the book bar's website. The book bar remains our co-host for the readings and the event celebration, and they'll gladly mail finalist books to you. Our sponsors also continue to support us online. Denver-based Outskirts Press, a longtime sponsor of the Colorado Center for the Book, stands ready to help authors develop, publish, and market their books. They're seeing an uptick in publishing right now, not surprisingly. People are having time to get to that project. And Colorado Sun is also providing funding and is featuring weekly Sunlit excerpts and interviews from many of our Colorado authors' books. And we want to thank them, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and all of you for being here. If you'll indulge me with a strange long hashtag that will get us in a national feed, it's hashtag CO Humanities at Home and hashtag CBA 2020 for all the excitement around the awards as we post about our experiences with the finalists and our work and their work. I am delighted to welcome Kevin J. Anderson as our MC, an author of more than 165 books, 56 of which have been national or international bestsellers. Anderson has written numerous novels in the Star Wars, X-Files, and Dune universes, my personal favorites, I just have to say, as well as unique steampunk fantasy novels, Clockwork Angels and Clockwork Lives, written with legendary rock drummer Neil Peart. I'm sorry, don't know that one. Peart.
You did pronounce it just right. Good job.
Okay, good, thank you. And based on that concept album by the band Rush. His original works include the Saga of Seven Suns series, the Terra Incognita fantasy trilogy, the Saga of Shadows trilogy, and his humorous horror stories featuring Dan Shamble, the zombie PI. He has edited numerous anthologies, written comics and games, and the lyrics to 2 rock CDs. Anderson and his wife, Rebecca Moesta, are the publishers of Wordfire Press. His most recent novels are Stake, Killzone, and Spine of the Dragon. Kevin, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for giving up your big Friday night plans to join us for these readings. I know you'd all rather be crowding into loud bars and jam dance clubs. Oh, wait, that's not authors. I mean, filling bookstores and browsing all the shelves. Well, we'll make do. I'm glad to be here to introduce some of this year's great finalists for the Colorado Book Awards. I won the Colorado Book Award myself a few years ago for my novel Clockwork Lives, written with Neil Peart from Rush. Most importantly, I know what it's like to be a nervous, nail-biting nominee. I was nominated several times before Clockwork Lives, and I attended each year's ceremonies in person, holding my breath as the awards were announced, only to have someone else win every single year. Finally, the one year that I couldn't attend the awards because I had another commitment, that's the year that I won. I'm convinced it was because I didn't attend in person. So in times like these, where we all have to hold on to our optimism and look at silver linings, think of it this way. All you nominees, thanks to COVID-19, none of you is going to attend the award ceremonies in person. So that means your chances of winning just tripled. Or maybe it doesn't work like that. I don't know. Anyway, tonight I am pleased to introduce you to 6 talented writers whose books have been named by Colorado Book Awards selectors as the finalists in the romance and science fiction and fantasy categories. The finalists from the romance category will start, followed by finalists in the science fiction category. We'll try and move quickly and have plenty of time for questions and answers. Our first reader tonight is Lauren Connolly, reading from her romance novel, Remembering a Witch. Lauren Connolly crafts love stories set in the contemporary world. Some are grounded in reality, while others play with the magical and mystical. She lives in southern Colorado, outnumbered by her animals. And Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be a part of this talented group, and I want to thank Colorado Humanities for finding a way for us all to get together and share our stories. I'm very excited to take part in this because since I live in Southern Colorado, I wasn't actually going to be able to attend the physical reading. So now that we're doing this virtually, I'm able to be here. So that's exciting. So I am going to read from my book, Remembering a Witch. So basically the inspiration for this book came from a lot of different little aspects. The autumn equinox was a big drive for this book. It's a theme kind of in it. Also, I combined kind of a love for the change in seasons and magic and romance and the forest and how that can be a really big symbol within writing. So when I approached this story, it's about a couple, Fenella and Graham, and it's a relatively short story, but I think that it kind of packs a lot into its few pages. And the overall story kind of follows them in this descent into the woods and discoveries that they make during that time. And I set it in Roanoke, Virginia, which I have family in that area, so I often visited that throughout my life. And there's this amazing hike that I went on with my brother and my father to this landmark called McAfee Knob, and it's this gorgeous overlook that you hike through the woods for hours, and you have woods just pushing in on you on all sides, and then you step out onto McAfee's Knob, and it's this gorgeous view. And that's kind of what this book is like. The characters, they're kind of focused, they're honed in on themselves, and then throughout the story they kind of step into this knowledge and they discover things about each other, and then also about kind of their pasts and whatnot. So I will read just the first couple of pages because it is a short bite. It's a good Sunday morning read. I just want to start off at the beginning. Okay, so you start from Fenella's perspective, the female protagonist. When the deep rumble of a man's chuckle brushes past my ears, ducking behind the nearest large object isn't even a conscious decision. I don't normally take cover at the sound of laughter, only I've never heard this particular laugh anywhere other than my dreams. The familiar sound fills my mind with memories that don't belong to me. As I press my back against the rough bark, I am transported away from the pristine university campus, finding myself surrounded by untamed woods. Sunlight barely reaches the forest floor, filtering through the tall canopy, stingy about which surfaces the rays illuminate. Small bugs flit about, sparkling when they pass through the light. They add a soft hum to the whistle of breeze between the branches. But all these sights and sounds fall away, overshadowed by the man standing across the clearing from me. His hair, the vibrant color of a ripe pumpkin, shimmers as if the strands were aflame. A friendly grin shows off a set of charmingly crooked teeth, which parts to let out another roll of chuckles. I always loved making Henry laugh. No, not me, I remind myself. Marbella made Henry laugh. I am not Marbella. Henry is not the man that I just heard. They both died long ago. I press my fingers against my closed eyelids as if that'll clear the phantom image from my mind. After a moment, the wild forest and handsome man drift away. As the vision dissipates, I drag in a deep breath to calm my racing pulse. This is what happens when I break with my routine. I blink my eyes open and find everything as it should be. The well-manicured, grassy expanse of lawn in the middle of the local university campus stretches out before me. Stray students meander along neatly paved sidewalks, many in shorts and tank tops on this beautiful sunny day. Unfortunately, I remain pressed against the tree. So the man sounded like him, I mutter to myself. That doesn't mean anything. As I converse with myself, Daisy sits on her haunches, staring up at me. My surprised vision has interrupted her walk, but she is kind enough to wait patiently as I work through my shock. I pull in another fortifying breath, planning to take a confident step away from my hiding place, spine straight, head held high. My body betrays me. Instead, I end up pulling the brim of my floppy hat low over my face and peeking around the trunk. The owner of the laughter is not hard to find. His flaming hair is a beacon, bright and familiar as Henry's. I retreat. By all the gods and goddesses, this can't be real. This can't be happening. Twigs pluck at the back of my long floral dress as I crouch, as if making myself smaller might somehow lessen the magnitude of this situation. Breathing becomes difficult, air stuttering in and out of my lungs, my body forgetting exactly how to absorb oxygen. My mind, despite being well tuned to the magical currents of the world, never expected to meet Henry anywhere other than in my dreams. He's not Henry, I remind myself, not any more than I'm Marbella. Another memory rises to the surface, this one my own. You are the spitting image of her. My mother holds a century-old painting beside my face, eyes splitting between the image and my teenage scowl with wonder in her expression. The heirloom is barely larger than my palm, a portrait of my ancestor, Marbella Henwood, the strongest witch our family has ever laid claim to, the woman who died 300 years ago. Discovering I was the reincarnation of a long ago dead woman has never sat well with me. What is a reincarnation anyway? My mother could never give me a good answer, could never say with utter confidence that I am my own person rather than a copy of one from the past. I've done my best to forget my odd heritage as I live my life how I see fit, but my magic doesn't want me to ignore anything. And that's it.
Yay. So if anybody has any questions for Lauren, can you type them into the chat? And if you keep thinking of some, maybe we can have a little bit of time at the very end of it. But I'm looking at our game show panel here of all of our faces of writers, and I think we'll don't see any messages or questions appearing just yet. So think about them, and thank you very much, Lauren. And now we're going to move on if everybody's ready. Our next reader is Karen Mckee, reading from her romance novel, Stolen Heart. After working in her local library reference center for 29 years, Mckee earned a BA in English from Regis University. A member of Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers and several local writing groups, she now resides with her husband in Western Colorado and writes faith-based stories full-time. Karen, off to you. Karen?
Yeah, had to unmute my mic.
There.
Thank you very much, Colorado Humanities, for this great honor and to be among such wonderful writers. I actually appreciate doing this through Zoom. I don't have to fight Denver traffic and travel over the mountains to get to Denver. So this is really nice. I'll be reading from my book, Stolen Heart. And it was inspired by my aunt, who spent a lifetime paying off her husband's debts. And she paid off the last one 2 weeks before she passed away. And it was in her 80s when she passed away. So the integrity of her doing that, it really inspired me to write this book. So to give you a little idea of what's happening, as her mother is dying, Abby Stewart reluctantly agrees to finish paying off her deceased father's debts. His current boss, Kevin, has unexpectedly given her the opportunity to do that by asking her to pose as his fiancée for a few weeks in place of his real fiancée, who has recently dumped him. He is going to his hometown to receive an award and will be staying with his family. Thinking that Kevin's family is as shady as he is, she agrees. When they arrive in his hometown, Abby meets Kevin's family, his mother, Pat, father, Leonard, and older brother, Jake, who runs the family dairy, and discovers Kevin's family isn't like him at all. She begins to regret her arrangement with Kevin. Abby finds herself attracted to Jake, and unknown to her, Jake is struggling with his own attraction to Abby. Jake has spent the evening with his family and Abby. Kevin has thrown a temper tantrum over Abby's teasing about photos from his youth. Kevin has retreated to his room, and 15 minutes later, Abby goes to his room to try to appease him. When Abby knocked at his door, he nearly bit her head off. "What?" "It's Abby. May I come in?" Kevin flew open the door and glared. "What?" He jerked his head, giving Abby permission to enter. She stopped in the middle of the room and faced him. "I'm sorry if looking at your childhood pictures made you uncomfortable. You were cute when you were little. I'll bet you had lots of little girls interested even then." She grinned and received a scowl in return. Kevin closed the gap between them, grabbed Abby's shoulders and kissed her, hard and quick. When he finished, he held her at arm's length, the scowl firmly in place. Abby scowled back. "What was that all about?" "A reminder that you're my fiancé, just in case you've forgotten." Abby stared at him, then shook her head. "Believe me, Kevin, I haven't forgotten, but I wish I could. This is not going to work. You have a wonderful family, and I hate lying to them." "To them or just Jake?" "What in the world are you talking about?" "You and Jake seem to be hitting it off pretty good." Abby was dumbfounded. She hadn't visited with Jake any more than she had Pat or Leonard. She tried to think of what she had done to make him and then it hit her. "You're jealous of Jake. That's it, isn't it? You think you have to be better, smarter, more successful than your big brother, and you'll do anything you think bests him." Kevin turned around and stuffed his hands in his designer jeans pockets. "Seriously? He's a dairy farmer, and I'm president of a nationally successful PR and advertising firm." His comment was laced with sarcasm and anger. He turned to face Abby. "It's Jake that's jealous. Always has wanted what I had, or had to do it better and bigger. But I've always finally gotten the best of him. The point is, I don't like looking bad to my family, and I don't like being made fun of, especially by my fiance." "Nobody was making fun of you, Kevin. Teasing a little, but all in good fun. And for the record, I'm technically not your fiance." Abby seethed inside. She struggled to keep her voice calm. Kevin sounded just like her father. Everyone was against him, or trying to put him down, or cause him to fail. They were both worse than a spoiled child. "For the record, Abby, I paid you $50,000 after taxes to pose as my fiance, so I suggest you start acting like one." "For the record, Kevin, I will when you start treating me like your fiance. Then you'll get your money's worth." Abby stalked past Kevin to the door. "You don't act like I'm even around. You spent most of dinner bragging about how successful you are. After a while, I found your bragging boring, but your family was genuinely interested and happy for you. Not once did Jake brag about anything. He just listened politely while you went on, and then said how proud he was of what you'd accomplished. You never once asked him about the dairy and how it's doing." "Why should I? It's a dairy. You milk cows morning and night. It's no big deal. I did it for more years than I care to remember while I was growing up. It doesn't take any brains to milk cows." Abby shook her head at Kevin. "I feel sorry for you. You can't see beyond yourself and what you want. Good night, Kevin." Jake stared at his computer screen, trying to concentrate on the columns of numbers, but all he could think about was Abby. In frustration, he hit save and exited the counting program. The books would have to wait until he could give them his full attention. What was it Humphrey Bogart said in Casablanca? Of all the gin joints in all the world, she had to walk into mine. That's not quite right, but he thought, but close enough. He hadn't expected to like Abby, but he did the minute he saw her. Morning didn't bring any relief for Jake. The minute he woke up, he found himself thinking of Abby and looking forward to seeing her again. Her riotous gold-red curls, tentative smile, and emerald green eyes that snapped with impishness drew him to her. But he saw something else in her eyes, if only for a moment, something troubling. He would love to be able to read her mind, find out what thoughts swirled around inside that pretty head of hers. What are you hiding, Abby? What secret resides behind those captivating eyes?
Wow. Clap, clap, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see. We got a question here from Chris Goff asking, you wrote this about a family member. Why did you choose to fictionalize the story?
Just didn't want to tell the story exactly, didn't want to make my cousins or anybody else feel uncomfortable. I just knew that I admired my aunt for what she did. She worked as a teacher all of her life. She didn't have a lot of money, but she spent her lifetime paying back his debts.
Okay. And I should actually remind everybody that you can keep posting questions here because we're going to have sort of a free-for-all Q&A session at the very end if anybody still has questions. So now I'm going to read our next introduction for Harper McDavid, which gives Harper a chance to find her unmute button and unmute while I'm reading the biography here. Our last reader of the romance category is Harper McDavid, who will read from her romance novel, Zapata. After watching her mother ride the writing roller coaster, Harper swore she would never do it herself, but some things are just hardwired. Her gritty romantic suspense incorporates both her background in science and engineering and her work experience along the border. It's all yours, Harper. Go ahead.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone with Colorado Humanities, all the volunteers and you guys that are making this possible. I wanted to talk first as to why I wrote a romantic suspense set on the border. And first of all, this is my book, Zapata. It's my debut novel. It was based on a project I had where I was assigned to find out why this particular oil company was losing crude oil. And they assumed it would be a technical problem. And as it turned out, it wasn't. It was a cartel problem. And not just one cartel, but two cartels battling for protection money or to take control so that, you know, the oil company would pay them protection money. Anyway, the story was so wild that I felt like I wanted to write a book about it. And somehow, unbeknownst to me, it turned out to be a romantic suspense. So I would like to read a little section which introduces the characters, the protagonist who had the job I had on this project, and then my villain and the romantic hero. So it's kind of set in the middle of a conversation, but I guess I wanted to give a picture of that. So, oh, 1 second. All right. Okay. It's a problem for sure. You can see whoever installed it basically just cut into the line. They did a really sloppy job. But even if it's leaking, it's not enough to explain how they're ending up short every month, Avery said. Well, well, what do we have here? A voice said. Two men sauntered in their direction. Avery glanced at Manuel for an explanation, but he seemed as clueless as she. Both men wore tailored dress shirts untucked and opened at the collar, mirrored aviators, GQ all the way. The taller of the two men paused at the top of the berm, peering down at them. Bruce lingered behind, barely inside the gate. The smaller man continued over the berm in their direction. Even from this distance, he struck her as pampered. His lower lip jutted out defiantly as he approached. Hector, His tone was a scolding taunt. You didn't tell us you were entertaining. His gaze rested on Avery. We would have been here earlier. He kicked at the ground with expensive Italian loafers. Please join us down here, Hector. A sneer crossed his face. A sneer crossed his face as he took obvious pleasure in watching Hector struggle to scramble over the berm. The man clapped his hands and said, now who would like to explain what the little nature of our gathering is about? Her shoulders tightened. This guy was deranged. Who was he? And how was it that he felt entitled to walk on Rockforth property in such a manner? She glanced at her so-called security team and site superintendent. Never before had she seen three people more interested in their own shoes. Avery sighed. Dealing with this guy would obviously fall to her. She stepped forward. Hi, I'm Avery McAndrews with Fenster Engineering. Her words came out a little faster than she intended, though her hand remained steady as she handed out business cards. The man snorted dismissively and made no effort to take it. I'm in the process of conducting a facility inspection. It was arranged by Mr. Rockforth's office. And I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. Despite her declaration otherwise, she was afraid she knew exactly who these were. Their tailored clothes and expensive haircuts made her think of Bruce's words, drug lords. She shifted her attention to the tall man, broad-shouldered and nothing like his fidgety partner. He stood with his arms crossed and a lizard boot resting on an overturned bucket. Even through his sunglasses, she felt his gaze calm and controlled. Irrationally, she felt a tinge of disappointment in his career choice. He was easily the best-looking man she'd ever seen. Meanwhile, the smaller man made a series of pronouncements in Spanish. Hector stared at the ground, blinking as if he were about to cry. The man repeated himself a second time, louder and sounding angry. Hector turned to Avery and pointed to the crazy man. His name is Javier Ramos, and he says to tell you he doesn't like redheads. Her blood surged, and she felt her face growing hot. She turned to the little cocky man. And I don't like people who can't speak for themselves. Is the name Javier Ramos supposed to mean something? For a second, no one moved. She held her breath, wishing she could take it back. But she never could shut her mouth when she was angry. Her eyes shifted to Javier's partner. Was it her imagination, or was he shaking his head? It was subtle, but now she was sure of it. And it wasn't a threat. It was a warning. He was telling her to back off. So, and that's it.
All right. See, I found my unmute button. Thank you very much, Harper. If you guys have any questions for any of our finalists, any of the readers, or maybe even just their works in general or writing in general, go ahead and post it into the chat section. We've got a question up here saying, I guess it's for Harper. What other genres have you written?
I've written an unpublished young adult book. That's
okay.
it.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna move on because unlike the Academy Awards, this thing is gonna be right on time, and we're gonna keep everything moving along just like it's supposed to. So, next we're gonna hear from finalists in the science fiction and fantasy category, and first up, Cate Glass will read from her science fiction fantasy novel, An Illusion of Thieves. The author of the fantasy adventure series Chimera, Cate Glass is a little bit familiar to some of us, is the pseudonym of Carol Berg, an author who has written 15 epic fantasy novels, won numerous Colorado Book Awards, and earned national and international acclaim. A former software engineer with degrees in mathematics and computer science, she was raised in Texas and now resides in the foothills of the Colorado Rockies. Carol, Cate, it's all yours.
One of us is here. Not sure which one.
Split personality.
All right. I'm going to be reading from my book, An Illusion of Thieves, which is the first in a series of fantasy adventures. A few years ago, I ran across an episode of the old Mission Impossible, which is, for those of you too young to remember, it's a spy caper adventure TV series. This is before Tom Cruise. And as an author's mind is wont to do, I said, what if what if this kind of ensemble intrigue occurred in a world of my own making? Something perhaps like the Italian Renaissance, maybe, but with magic. And then I thought, ooh, forbidden magic, and you got to have magic for your caper. So a small group of sorcerers and their skills and their relationships would be at the heart of each adventure. Happily, the leader of this group of popped to mind immediately, and I'm going to let her tell of herself in her own words, and it's just a little snippet. I was born Romy, eldest of 13 children my parents could not afford to feed. One brother and I, out of all those 13, were born cursed with the taint of magic in this world that believes sorcerers are a monster's get and must be eradicated. From an ignorant, filthy child of 10, procurers at the Moon House groomed and educated me into a person they named Cataline, a courtesan of impeccable wit, taste, and manners. But inside, I was always scrawny, starving Romy, terrified that either my tutors or the fearsome man to whom I was gifted at 15 would discover the corruption I spent every hour hiding. After 9 years, when I fell from the Shadow Lord's grace and was banished from his house, it was pitifully easy to become Romy again. But Romy needed to become smart and tough and practical. In particular, Romy has to deal not only with how to get work, how to get her next meal, but with a 15-year-old brother who is illiterate, obstinate, and dangerously reckless with his magic and everything. An Illusion of Thieves is the story of Romy's fall and rebirth and how she gets her little group of misfits together. She finds work as a scribe, and she thinks she's found a solution to the problem of her brother in the scene that I'm going to read. Humph! The grunting swordsman filled our open doorway. Your place here, unexpected for the beggar's ring. But for the accuracy of his sentiment, one might easily doubt that Placidio de Vasil's swollen, seeping eyes could take in the details of my household. The rest of him was no more promising. He reeked of wine and urine. An angry scar creased his face from eye to the clotted rat's nest of black hair on his chin. Grime and grease disguised the colors of his cheap doublet. Yet my expectations were not entirely correct either. First glimpse said he'd run to fat, but the buff jerkin and leather breeches hugged a big frame layered with muscle and sinew. The taverner had called the duelist old man, but not even his unhealthy skin would mark him past 35. Be welcome, swordmaster. I motioned him to step inside. You're no lawyer, are you, Romy of Lizard's Alley? He asked, lip curled enough to twist the ugly scar. His glance scoured my shelf of pen cases, ink flasks, and stacked parchment. Why do you care what I am? I said, more curious than annoyed. 'Tis unsafe to have me waving a blade near vermin. Truly, many citizens had reasons to be wary of lawyers. Be at ease. I'm but a lowly scribe, I said, and it's my brother Neri will be your student. Student? My brother arrived in our doorway as if his name had summoned him. He scowled at the slovenly man, whose height topped his by the length of his forearm. Neri sat a stack of clean parchment on the table. I know how to swill wine well enough, he said. Senor de Vasil comes recommended, little brother. Supposedly he teaches better than he washes. We'll hope. My jab slid off the man, whose bleared eyes took Neri's measure in turn. Neri fretted that he'd not yet reached even my height. A scrapper, are you, boy? Mostly fists and feet, and lose more than you win, I'm guessing. But you've a new blade at your belt. The swordmaster extended a scarred hand that could enclose an infant's head entire. Let me see it. I'd do all right. Neri glared at me and clamped his hand on the metal-bound sheath that housed his new dagger. Don't need a new teacher, Romy. This one looks more like to steal the blade than to know what's to do with it. I jerked my head sharply in the direction of the duelist. Show him. Only an idiot would leave her fool of a brother at the mercy of a drunkard swordmaster half again his size and infinitely more skilled, but I also had hours of copying to do before the next morning. I needed to get a sense of the swordsman quickly, and if he seemed promising, See their first lesson done. Grudging, Neri passed over the dagger. Placidio examined the grip, quillion's edge and point as a physician explores skulls, tongues, and urine. Well chosen, he conceded, a good length. But what need has a beggar's ring, boy, for a new blade and finer skills? Have you acquired a new enemy? 'Twould likely be cheaper to hire me to fight than pay me to train a hothead to skewer a dunderwit. You don't look a man who could teach anything fine, snapped Neri, his forehead scarlet. The duelist rolled his eyes at me as if to say, you see? So the fellow's perceptions were not entirely dulled. He has no particular enemy, I said, as Neri smoldered, but the world is hard and dangerous. We've recently lost our father, and my brother approaches his majority. Experience has taught me great appreciation of the sword's discipline. I thought perhaps a sword master could impart something of that discipline to my brother, though doubts gather about you along with the flies. Ebullient laughter burst from him, like crisp new wine from a new open cask, only to be swallowed quickly. Can't argue that now, can I? He said, harsh and low. So where shall we retire to give this a try? I'd hate to splatter blood on your parchment, lady scribe of Lizard's Alley. So.
All right. Okay, everybody keep posting questions in the chat field, and after everyone here has had a chance to do their reading and we make sure that we have enough time, then we can just roll through the questions and everybody will be put on the spot all over again, which is, I'm sure they're just looking forward to that. Thank you, Carol, for the reading. Good to hear a new work from you. Our next reader, Warren Hammond, will read from his science fiction fantasy novel, Denver Moon, The Saint of Mars, Book 2. The author of several science fiction novels, quite a few short stories, and a graphic novel, Warren's 2012 novel, Cop Killer, won the Colorado Book Award for Best Mystery. His latest series is co-written with Joshua Viola. And Warren, it's all yours.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and really appreciate the big audience. I wish I could see you all in person. So this is book 2, as Kevin just said, of the Denver Moon series. And I co-authored with Josh Viola, who came to me a few years ago with the idea for the series, and basically said, you know, I'm thinking about doing a story about a detective on Mars who talks to her gun. Right, so that's pretty much the foundation. So her gun is her sidekick. It's got an artificial intelligence installed inside. And this is book 2. It's called The Saint of Mars. We're just barely really getting started on book 3, which we plan to end the trilogy with that one. So maybe look for that in the next year or so, if we can manage to get it done by then. So I'm going to read just right from the beginning. Get my glasses on. I kept to the shadows, back pressed against the wall, my head swiveling left and right, scanning, searching. 2 months of work and I finally had a name, Lucas Robbins, age 47, Earthborn, immigrated to Mars 6 years back, address unknown. The market was busy this time of day. Shift changes up and down the levs crowded the tunnels of this ant colony of a city. Hawkers pitched their wares, amplified by scratchy speakers, the garbled voices drilled into my ears. Cooks worked fryers and griddles inside cramped booths soaked in bright neon. Electric fans lured customers by blowing the enticing odors of spiced faux meat out into the thoroughfares. The latest missing person was last seen at the noodle bar down the way. That was 2 days ago, 2 days since anybody had seen Millie Lopez. Her last known meal, a tofu bowl, split between her and her mother, the noodle bar's prep cook. A teenage boy peeled off from the mass of people moving past. Approaching me, he touched a finger to the artery in his neck. I waved him away. Standing in the recesses like I was, he couldn't be the only one to mistake me for a quick jab dealer. See anything, Smith? I subvocalized the AI installed in my gun. Facial rec still reporting no hits, he said. But I can't see very well from here. Even looking through your eyes, I can only make out about half the faces well enough for comparisons. Any way you can get me to a higher location. I pulled the Smith & Wesson off my belt and reached up to balance him atop a drain pipe that ran the length of the wall. Turn me a little to the left, Denver, and moved me close to the edge. I complied, doing my best to give his visual sensors the broadest possible view, while keeping the gun balanced on the rounded surface. How's that? Much better. Still can't see everybody, but I can see most as they pass. I arched my back and pressed my shoulders against the grimy wall. You'd think a sealed environment like the tunnels this far down would be spotless, but the dust from the terraforming project was an insidious bastard. Try as we might to keep the whirling clouds of dust out, a fine powdery grit still wormed its way through the filters and along the corridors and down the lifts and drop shafts, the stairwells and ladder tubes, to cover everything with a film I was told was red. I wouldn't know. All the grit and grime is the same color to me, just like the people, the clothes they wear, the blood they spill. Other people see colors and shades. I just see Mars. A headache started shoving at the back of my eyes. I pushed harder against the rock wall. The kink between my shoulder blades didn't appreciate the pressure, but I pressed harder. I needed a massage, a 3-day drunk or a 4-day zone, a month of sleep. I needed a line of work, a different line of work. I'll stop there. Thank you.
There, my turn to try not find the mute button in the right place. So anyway, thank you, Warren. That was great and very intriguing. And that was from book 2. So maybe we have to go and look for book 1 again. The next reader in the science fiction category is Claire L Fischbach, reading from her science fiction fantasy novel, The Blood of Seven. An award-winning author, she writes horror novels and is also the author of Lump, a collection of short stories. In her spare time, she enjoys adding to her bone collection and poking dead things with sticks. That's charming. Well, go ahead, Claire. You're going to have to match that introduction then. Well,
thanks for the intro, Kevin. So when I found out that I was a finalist for this incredible award, and it's an incredible honor to be a finalist, I have to say, I was thrilled. My husband and I were on our way back from Portugal. I hadn't been checking my emails or Facebook at the time. So we landed in New Jersey to get our connecting flight to Denver. And I'm just scrolling through my emails and it says, Mark Stevens mentioned you on Facebook. And I glanced at it and I was just like, wait, what? Seriously? And then I like madly scrolled through my emails looking for the actual email from Colorado Humanities Center for the book. And I couldn't find it for whatever reason. And my husband was in the bathroom. I'm just like trying to contain myself because I was so excited. And he starts coming back toward me and I'm just like jittering and like stomping my feet and just like, oh my gosh. And he gets back over, he's like, what is going on? I was like, ah! So anyway, it's an incredible honor and I'm super excited to read a little bit out of my book, The Blood of Seven. I'll tell you a little bit about it before I begin. I'm going to read the first chapter. Okay, when Detective Ann Logan sees a shimmering vision of a young girl, she tries to dismiss it as a trick of mountain light, but she can't dismiss the arcane symbol that rose like a brand on her chest and burns with life when the vision becomes reality. Then townspeople begin to disappear, and Anne's investigation plunges her into an eternal war between two secret societies, one serving the malevolent designs of a mysterious deity, the other trying to keep them at bay. How can she know what to do, who to trust? The answers lie in the tattered pages of an ancient manuscript and in the heart of the little girl Anne must protect. Can Anne embrace her destiny in time, or will the child of chaos arise? Chapter 1. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. Fake it till it feels right again, or run as far and as fast as possible to try to escape it. Detective Ann Logan, if she could even call herself a detective anymore, ran along the trail, gravel crunching beneath her feet. Lodgepole pines towered overhead, blocking out most of the stars still visible in the early morning sky. According to her GPS watch, she was on mile 3, but the nightmare images from the Salida Stabber case threatened to break her mind further than they already had. She pushed faster. Sometimes it took only 1 mile, sometimes 5, sometimes a 6er of her favorite brew. Her therapist urged against the latter, so Anne ran deep into the San Isabel National Forest in Colorado's Rocky Mountains. The usual nightmare had awoken her at 3 a.m. and left her shaking under the sweat-filled sheets. It was the version in which Bruce, her old partner, came back from the dead to tell her his death was all her fault. Then the stabber's last victim did the same. The dream wormed its way under her skin where it ate away at her sanity little by little. They said 2 words over and over again, the same 2 words she chastised herself with. Too late, too late, too late. Their voices chanted in her ears in rhythm with her footsteps and the bouncing light from her headlamp. Images from the case flipped through her mind like a grotesque slideshow. She broke into an all-out sprint. A tree root arched over the trail in the light's beam. It snagged her foot and sent her sprawling onto her stomach. The air rushed out of her body. The voices stopped. After a few gasping breaths, she climbed to her feet. She walked a little way to catch her breath before breaking into a run again. The clearing where she usually turned around came into view. The crescent moon hung in the sky like the stabber's sadistically perfect smile. She turned to head back down the trail when a tingling sensation spread over her skin. Anne rubbed her arms, but her flesh was free of goosebumps. The moonlight illuminated her skin, but no, that wasn't it. The veins just beneath the surface glowed blue-white. She rubbed at it again, but the illumination didn't go away. She lifted her shirt, then her pant leg. Her whole body glowed. The tingling intensified. It burned like lava flowing through her nervous system. She dropped to her knees, closed her eyes against the agony, and let out a low wail of pain. Static filled her ears. Through the crackle, a voice compounded of many voices said, "Protect her." Anne opened her eyes. Bright light flooded her vision, blinding her. A thin black figure appeared in the distance. It came closer until it resolved into the silhouette of a young girl around 6 or 7. Her eyes glowed the same blue-white. She lifted something, a book, the interior gilded with the light. The book flew toward Anne. Scribbled words filled the pages. One of them flared, blinding Anne even further. Sophia. Anne's heart boiled inside her chest. She cried out again. Then the book and the girl faded away. The clearing came back into focus. No girl, no book, just the clearing surrounded by towering pines. Anne's breath came in short, painful gasps, as if she had just arrived in the clearing from the previous sprint. She must have pushed herself too hard out on the trail. That was all. Her brain was signaling a blood sugar crash or something. She jogged back down the trail. Or maybe it was stress. Stress did all kinds of things to people. Couldn't it cause hallucinations? Sorry, my dog. Someone knocked on the door. A second failed psych evaluation had taken its toll on her psyche. Inside her truck, Anne pulled on her jacket. The fabric rubbed over a sore spot on her chest. She touched it and winced.
Claire, why don't you Claire, just hold off for a second.
Okay.
We'll wait for you. We'll wait for you.
Thanks. Sorry about that. My husband's handling it.
Right. I know. Well, it's really hard to concentrate reading and keep your straight face when all that's going on in the background. So
I know. I tried.
Yes, that's quite all right. Just think of it if we were in person in the Colorado Book Awards and a bunch of like fire trucks went by. Or
Oh yeah. Okay. Or a pack of dogs, that would be great.
Something like that. So whenever you're ready again, just go ahead and just skip back a few sentences to pick us up and go ahead again.
Okay. Is she quiet? Is she going to be quiet?
Sorry.
That's okay. 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 She jogged back down the trail. Or maybe it was stress. Stress did all kinds of things to people. Couldn't it cause hallucinations? A second failed psych evaluation had taken its toll on her psyche. Inside her truck, Anne pulled on her jacket. The fabric rubbed over a sore spot on her chest. She touched it and winced. The skin was raised and felt raw. She flipped open the collar and peered down at it. At first, she thought the 2-inch long raw and red brand was an Egyptian ankh, but on closer inspection, it sort of resembled an upright Jesus fish. 3 bands encircled where the lines met to become the tail. No, what is this? She poked it again and winced. Nothing had touched her out there. She hadn't even crashed into any overgrown bushes. She gripped the steering wheel. Tears sprang to her eyes. She willed herself to keep it together until she got home and could assess the situation, figure out the facts, what happened and what didn't. The keys jangled in her hand, but she managed to get the right one in the ignition. She wasn't ready. She knew that. No matter how ready she may have felt before this, no matter how ready she was to take another eval, she couldn't go back to work. Anne shuffled to her front door. A box about 2 feet square sat on her doorstep. UPS was on top of it today. She'd never received a package during the night. On closer inspection, however, there was no postage of any kind, just her name scrawled on the top in black marker. Anne squatted next to the package and examined the outside. Using her keys, she sliced open the tape and folded back the flaps. the first thing she noticed was the smell.
So you're going to leave us with the smell. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Claire. And again, everybody, go ahead and just post your questions in the chat at the side. And when we're done with our last reader here, then we'll have a little open forum and we can talk for a few minutes here. And okay, tonight, the final reader who's been waiting patiently right in the center of our Hollywood squares here is Mark Stevens, reading from Gary Reilly's science fiction fantasy novel, The Legend of Carl Draco. Reilly only published one piece of writing in his lifetime, a short story published by the Iowa Writers Review and later picked up by the Pushcart Prize Anthology in 1979. Since his death in 2011, Running Meter Press has published 13 of his novels, 5 of them Colorado Book Award finalists. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you everybody at Colorado Humanities for this. Chris Goff, Josephine Jones, everybody behind the scenes. I know you're there. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Mark Stevens with Running Meter Press. My cohort, Mike Keith, may or may not be watching from Mexico where he lives now. Mike introduced me to the fabulous Gary Reilly back in 2004, and I was lucky enough to know Gary for the last 7 years of his life. I just want to reiterate the fact that Gary left behind 25 fabulous novels when he passed away, all in terrific shape, just that close, ready to be published. The 13th novel last year that we published was The Legend of Carl Draco, which I'll read from here in a second. The 14th is coming out next month, and we'll have a launch event at Tattered Cover or some sort of virtual presentation like this in mid-July, and that is the 9th novel in the Asphalt Warrior series, which is Gary's very funny, humorous series about a Denver cab driver. That book is titled Varmint Rumble, and that comes out again next month. I just want to underscore one thing, and that is that Gary could write in a number of different styles. And what you're going to hear tonight is a very rich, different kind of pacing to the rhythm and the way he writes. It's very, it takes a while for at least for my ear to get used to the way he wrote this book. It's actually very similar to the short story that Kevin mentioned, The Biography Man, that was published in 1977. Gary sent it cold to the Iowa Review, and they picked it up and put it in their collection. So this is a really interesting, I think, book. It's really one of a kind. Let me see if you can see it there. The Legend of Carl Draco. Some guy named Warren Hammond said, Reilly's Carl Draco is a man of few words, fewer goals, and some wildly powerful juju. Fueled by dizzying magic and moonshine, The Legend of Carl Draco delivers a deliciously vengeful yarn I couldn't wait to unspool. And thank you, Warren, for that wonderful blurb. And another fabulous local writer named Angie Hodap said this, and I just think I'm reading these because they really capture the spirit. I never would have thought of this combination, but Angie said that Neil Gaiman meets Flannery O'Connor in this story of a drifter coming home to reclaim his fate. I think that's a terrific kind of touchstone for the style here. So here's the opening of The Legend of Carl Draco. I'll just read a little bit so you can get a flavor for the vocabulary, and hopefully you're interested, but here we go. You could walk down a road you've walked before and not recognize the familiar bleach of neon painting sidewalk slabs at your feet because those fine and freshly snipped and lilac watered barber college hairs at the back of your neck are being stroked harder and faster by that old anticipation. The sounds of the city might plunge into silence in the way air suddenly stands still in reverent preamble to the advent of a plains tornado, making you to stop long enough to take a quick look over your shoulder. No one seems to be following you, but you step into the nearest saloon to take stock of the situation, and the sight of drinking men takes your mind momentarily off your own soluble problems. You ease yourself onto the torn and stitched oilcloth seat of a stool at the far end of the bar and lean forward to signal the bartender for a glass of red wine. You glance down the long line of seated customers and wonder who among all these Salvation Army discard suits might be contemplating a nightcap of surreptitious stalking culminating in futile assault. But you realize quickly enough that all the schemes and dreams of all the men rooted to stools in the Skid Row gin mill could be stacked heel to shoulder, and the final tote wouldn't top a 3-tiered shot glass pyramid. They sit with their shoulders hiked high to hide trembling fingers counting coins or pinching cigarettes going up in smoke. Sipping in silence is the only plan of any man in here. The bartender places a glass of red wine in front of you and collects his take, and you finally relax. On the TV overhead, gloved men in silk trade shots, but the sound is turned down too low. You can't hear the smack of bruised flesh or the rattle of bones decked in the second round. When your glass is empty, you order another for the heat you'll need for the fight you'll win later on. Then you place a $1 tip on the bar and walk out. Alleys are favored places of your enemies, so you approach the upcoming break in the wall slowly, though not out of fear or even necessarily caution. But you have to give it to them if you want to get it over with quickly and put enough distance between yourself and their corpses to lie low long enough to sleep well enough to be awake enough for the next fight. Then a fast black bulk leaps past your head. A tin lid rattles in the darkness like a coin settling on asphalt, and you uncurl your newly balled fists and grin at the sight of a tomcat running up the sidewalk with fish bones in its teeth. It had been a long time since Draco had laughed at himself, much less grinned. In fact, he couldn't recall even smiling in a long time, but he was laughing now as he watched that scuttling outcast haul his feast. Draco moved on, making for a building that he'd called home more than once while passing through this part of the country, a $20 a night flop house complete with bed and no bath. He came to another alley and overheard the drone of bum chatter devoid of malice. The devious ways of his enemies had never taken the form of this masquerade, had always been frontal and fruitless, so he wasn't particularly concerned as he peered into the darkness toward 3 men seated on concrete near a garbage dumpster with their backs against the wall. He knew them, had stood all 3 at different times in different bars. Cadge masters, they licked their glasses empty and shared day labor take when they had it, shared wine, shared life stories, and sat down uninvited to beg or offer smokes. He'd spent alley evenings with such men in other cities, drawn from his digs to their brief companionship, because even a man unlike themselves needs to sit down once in a while and shoot the kind of bull they shoot best.
Wow. Thanks, Mark. That wasn't an easy passage to read, so good job on that. So
the whole book is like that.
Wow. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes. We've had some questions pile up in the chat session, and I'm going to read them all. Some of them are specific for people, and when I ask you a question, I shouldn't have to tell you because you're all very intelligent writers, but you need to unmute your microphone before you answer, because otherwise it'll be a tree falling in the forest and nobody hearing. So the first question we've got from David Boop is asking for Harper. Harper, if this was based on real events, even fictionalized, did you have to get people to sign waivers or contact a lawyer? So I'll let Harper answer that one.
No, but Harper's not my real name.
So nobody knows who to sue, right? So
no, but there have been some authors that haven't fared well after writing about the cartel. So, and the rest of this book is so fictionalized that, but still,
yeah,
Harper's not my real name.
Yeah. Well, and I'll jump in too, that you don't have to get legal permission if somebody like inspired you to something, unless you're like absolutely making it clear to any reader that this is who you're taking it from. And I think most of us always draw our characters from people we've met and people we know. So anyway, I'm going to go on to the next one. This one's for Lauren. Lauren, do you divide your book evenly between historical and contemporary times? And math is not my forte, but is this a witch from the Salem witch trials era?
So I would say that about a fourth of the book takes place in the past, and the past scenes take place. I think I did it about a decade after the Salem witch trials. So there is a mention of the Salem witch trials, and they do affect how a character decisions that a character makes. But this isn't a specific witch from those trials.
Okay. The next one is for Carol / Kate. So kind of you can have, whoever is going to answer it, we can answer it. Tell us about writing under two names. Was becoming Kate easy for you or difficult? Will you keep adding to your Carol Berg canon?
This was something that I changed publishers in between my 15 epics and this particular series. And after I had handed in the book, that I had written it over the previous year. And my first conversation with my new editor asked if I would consider writing under a pseudonym. And she said the reason was she believed that it would get more attention as a debut from Tor rather than just an author moving from one publisher to another. And they hope to broaden my audience because these books are different. They're a little shorter. They're more episodic rather than telling big stories over 2, 3, or 4 books. And so I said, okay, I'm willing to do that. I'm, half the writers I know, probably more than that, write under multiple names. And the difficulty was that they told me it would be an open pseudonym so that my current readers and friends would know, and I'm free to, say, oh yeah, it's me, I usually say, Kate's younger and skinnier and sexier, but I'm the brains of the outfit. And so that's what I like to go by. But the thing I found was that I sort of built too big an infrastructure, trying to maintain multiple Facebook, multiple Twitter, multiple identity. It became too much. I needed to write the books, and so whether it's done what we hoped it would do, the jury's still out on that. So yeah, it was hard in a way. And yes, I will write more books or maybe some short fiction. I've got some short fiction I would like to put out under the Carol Berg name. I don't want to leave that name behind either. And there are 2 more books in this series. Conjuring of Assassins just came out this spring. And then the one that I actually just turned in right before we all had to stay home was called A Summoning of Demons. So that's the 3rd book of the 3rd episode of my Chimera series. So yes, I hope to continue writing under both names.
Okay, we've got another question for Carol, but I'm going to skip to one for Warren, then I'll come back to Carol. For Warren, can Smith pass the Turing test? Unmute, there we go.
He not only passed it, but he aced it. He got the best score ever and got into Harvard. No,
he's thought of that question.
Yeah, we wrote him like he's a person. So, there's a little bit of, in some of the earlier stories that we wrote about Denver, she's a little bit on the fence about are artificial beings real people or not. But we kind of have already dealt with that. So we rewrote him like he's a real person.
Okay. And quick back, another one for Carol. What is Romy's idea of a balanced adventuring party?
Well, at the point where I was reading, she had no idea about an adventuring party at all. And it turned out, it's sort of an assemblage. Obviously, this sword master is going to turn out to be a sorcerers are rare because they've been systematically exterminated over a number of generations. But what I did, it was Kate really who had the idea of what an adventuring party should be. And if you look at everything from the Three Musketeers on up and down to ensemble kinds of groups, you tend to have the leader, somebody who can carry off, the planning and also do impersonations, perhaps. You have the tech guy, and in the Renaissance time frame, that takes on a slightly different thing. But also you have to have a wheelman, somebody who can get you in and out of places. And those in this particular group are combined. And then you have muscle, somebody who's a good fighter. You look at something like Leverage, you've got the techie, you've got the fighter, you've got everybody. And then you have perhaps a thief or a sleight of hand. And oftentimes the thief is a student. If you think of D'Artagnan in Three Musketeers, you have the eager student, and we can see clearly who's going to fulfill that role. And so as this story is the story of how this group assembles through a mission, an adventure that they had Romy had no idea that she was going to have to do, but it turned out to be sort of a life or death thing. And so she assembled her friend, and then it turned out it worked pretty well. So that's how. So she didn't have an idea. I had the idea.
Chris, how much time are we slotted for?
We have a little more time. We can answer some more questions.
Okay. I'm going to rattle through as fast as I can so that we can get everybody a chance to answer these questions. So next, for Claire, what are the challenges or the rewards of being a woman who writes horror?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because I haven't really come up against any challenges as being a woman who writes horror. I think it is a challenge because it is typically a male-dominated genre. But I think a lot of the time when I tell people I'm a writer, they always assume that I write fantasy or romance or something like that. And I tell them horror, and they're usually like, what? No way. And then I'm like, oh yeah, you should see my bone collection. It's awesome. And then there's a whole Poking Dead Things with 6, they get a little, surprised about that. But the reward, that's actually the reward, is seeing the look on people's faces when I tell them that I write horror. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes. Well, there are plenty of Laurel K. Hamilton and Sherilyn Kenyons and Patricia Briggs. And I mean, they're all maybe urban fantasy or whatever, but I'd still call them all horror. Angie Hojap suggests that we need a pet show for all of us panelists. I'm surprised my cats haven't crawled all over me while we've been doing this. But another question for Claire, or for Mrs. Fishback, if we want to be formal about here. What research or preparation did you do for your book?
So at some point during the multiple rewrites of this book, which I've been working on since 2007, off and on, I discovered the Nag Hammadi Library, which is a collection of heretical secret texts that were never talked about, that were supposed to be in the Bible but weren't. And there's a demiurge in that named Yaldabaoth, and so I just scoured the internet, and I have like 4 books that are probably like this thick each, of like translations of this whole library. One story in particular, on the origin of the world, is basically about how he came to be and what his role is in the origin of the world, obviously. So I did a lot of reading of those texts, and that's kind of it. But it's a lot of, there's a lot out there. It's like I said, the books are like that thick. It's crazy.
Wow. Well, we're got a couple of comments and questions about Gary Reilly, and for Mark Stevens. Chris Goff says his writing in this book is sort of poetic. How many science fiction books did he write? I only know of his mysteries.
Let me see, out of the dozen or so left we have to publish, there's a series that I would call fantasy. I wouldn't call it like heavy sci-fi. Probably 3 or 4 books. That's a good question. This is the first of that style that we've published. So I didn't come with an inventory of what is left, but I would say a few more. He loved B movies. He loved anything to do with outer space kind of stuff. He would just, he liked a lower quality of, sci-fi, kind of like those pulpy kind of things. And yeah, we still have a fair amount of variety to reveal from Gary's palette or voice.
Related question from Angie Hodap. Listening to you read, I'd add Ursula K. Le Guin to that mix. This is such a departure for Gary. Is Draco an outlier for him, or is there more magical realism for us fans to look forward to?
Yes, the other series, I'll tentatively give it a title because Gary gave it a title called Hollywood Land. He had multiple titles for some of these projects.
There's my pet.
Yeah.
You happy, Angie?
There is some more magical realism to come.
Okay, and another question about for Warren, what year or time period is your book taking place?
We never really pin it down. It's the somewhat distant future, I guess. The premise is that Earth has become uninhabitable, and people have moved, a small group of people anyway, have moved to try to settle Mars. And it turns out to not be the great place that they thought it was going to be. So humanity's in peril of perishing. So, but I don't know, maybe 200 years to 500 years. I don't know. It's big.
And let's see, Jeremiah is asking Claire the question that we are all wondering is that, are they animal bones or human bones in your collection?
Mostly animal. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. But humans are animals too, so you could just expand it that way, right? Let's see. Aaron Lovett on Facebook wants to know what you've done with Josh's body, Warren. I guess somebody needs to know what that means, but do you know what that means?
Tell.
Oh,
Never
it's
tell.
not going to tell.
But he's well hidden.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna just take a second to reread the titles and the authors that you've heard from tonight, just to give them another last little plug. Remembering a Witch by Lauren Connolly. Wave your hand, Lauren. There she is. Okay. Stolen Heart by Karen Mckee. Zapata by Harper McDavid. There we go. An Illusion of Thieves by Cate Glass. Denver Moon, The Saint of Mars, Book 2 by Warren Hammond and Josh Viola. Here we are. The Blood of Seven by Claire L Fischbach. And The Legend of Carl Draco by Gary Reilly. All right. Well, that's all of you guys. I want to give one last little plug, just because you're exactly the right group of audience for it. Just last year, I became the director at at Western Colorado University down in Gunnison. I became the director of their publishing master's program. So I give 1 year grad student classes on getting a degree in publishing, which is balanced on entirely on traditional publishing and indie publishing, and copyrights and contracts and promotion and book design and cover design and typesetting and editing and all that kind of stuff. And we're just wrapping up our first cohort. They're going to graduate in July, and we're going to start a new batch in July. And you can look on Western Colorado University's website and search for publishing, and you find it. But one of their big projects, and I'm kind of glowing and happy here, the students had to put together their own professional anthology. We got support from Draft to Digital, $6,000 so we could pay pro rates for all these stories, and they edited the whole anthology. They solicited the submissions. They read 435 stories in the slush pile. They went through and selected the best ones, and they wrote rejections on the ones they didn't select. They wrote contracts. They edited them. They put the book together. They designed the cover. They're right now, they've done reviews. They're getting pre-release stuff. And just 2 days ago, we got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. So they must have done a pretty decent job on it. So
Great.
I'm very happy about that. Go ahead, Chris.
Just have them enter it in the Colorado Book Awards next year.
Do you have an anthology category? I didn't know that you did. You do?
We do.
Okay, since I'm the director of the program, they are damn well going to enter it. So, all right, everybody, we're going to wrap things up. Let me get my cursor over here. Scrolling down, I lost a bit. Finally, we've answered all of your questions, and I'm glad that you could all be here with us virtually. And I'm glad to see some familiar faces and chat a little bit, meet some new people, have nightmares about whatever bones Claire has buried somewhere or other. And I think we're going to wrap this up. We'll turn it back over to Josephine to walk us out.
May I say something very quickly? I sympathized with Claire with the noise. I prayed that the trains wouldn't go through while we were doing this because I live right across the highway from the railroad tracks and they make a lot of noise. So a lot of whistles for the crossing. So I sympathize.
Yes, thank you everyone for risking the exposure of broadcasting from home. And thank you, Kevin, for your own amazing writing. Thanks to all of you who's joined us for staying in and logging on. We'd love to hear what you thought about tonight's program in the chat or in an email. Suggestions are welcome. I want to remind you, Outskirts Press and Colorado Sun, we wouldn't be here without them. And if you reach out to them for services or support, please let them know you're there because they support the Colorado Center for the Book. And please support local businesses by ordering your choice of books from the Hollywood Squares here from the Book Bar. Gather the children round the monitor tomorrow afternoon, May 2nd, for children's literature at 1 p.m. with illustration videos and readings by authors. Next Friday's evening finalist reading will be general nonfiction history pictorial at 7 p.m. Same channel, same place. You'll need your snacks lined up because it will be another third as long as tonight's program. So, you know, be sure everything's to hand. It'll be a fun evening. Winners will be announced at an online event broadcast live from our Hope For venue this year, which is the Evans School in downtown Denver near the Art Museum. It's that old, beautiful building that nobody's been in for 30 years, and we were going to get to go in and be in their vintage auditorium. So Maggie and I and a short list of crew will be there to broadcast the program on schedule May 30th. We are going to start the broadcast at 4 p.m. Stay tuned to our website and social media for details. I got to tell everybody, opt into the newsletter at the bottom of any of our web pages. And I want you all to stay well and see some of you tomorrow and next week. Thanks all for coming.